Dear colleagues, students, and guests, good day and welcome to this special online gathering on the occasion of World Theatre Day, as celebrated globally on the 27th March of March 2025. It's our honor and privilege to introduce our distinguished speaker for today's lecture, Professor Dr. Evrim Doğan Adanur, the head of Department of the English Language and Literature at Fenerbahçe University, Istanbul. As we cannot profound influence of Shakespeare and his timeless contributions to human culture and English literature through theatre, his works have shaped the course of theatre history and human thought in many ways that continue to resonate with us today. On this day, when we honor the transformative power of theatre, we turn our attention to one of the celebrated aspects of Shakespeare's legacy, his tragedies, under the title of Problem Tragedies. These works, often defined by their complex characters, moral ambiguities, and tragic outcomes, invite us into a world of deep reflection on human nature, politics, society, and essence of tragedy itself. As we celebrate the art of drama and theatre on the World Theatre Day, once more, I would like to welcome Evrim Hocam and our audience to a speech and discussion afterwards to let us open our minds to the lasting relevance and the role of Shakespeare's work in our understanding of literature and theatre. I invite all of you to explore the topic deeper and further with your comments and contributions after the speech today. And I want to introduce Evrim Hocam. Professor Dr. Evrim Doğan Adanur, with her expertise in Shakespeare, will guide us through the Shakespeare's works and provide insight into unique qualities that make Shakespeare's problem tragedy so relevant to our contemporary audience today as teachers and students. Professor Dr. Doğan Adanur's current research examines a range of different approaches to Shakespeare and early modern drama, focusing on the relationship between temporality and genre. She also has published articles on detective fiction, Chicana literature, American drama, and translation studies. She is the graduate of Hacettepe University. She holds an MA from American University in Washington, and she also got her PhD from Ankara University. And she conducted her postdoctoral studies at the Shakespeare Institute in Birmingham University. Teaching English studies for 25 years. She's currently working as the founding chair and the professor of English at the Department of English Language and Literature at Fenerbahçe University. Thank you for joining us for this talk, during which we will expand our knowledge on Shakespeare by the help of respected researcher of Shakespeare, Evrim Hocam. And our minds are part of you to feed. Our audience is eagerly waiting, and spotlight is now on the Evrim Hocam.
Thank you sincerely for your presence today, students, colleagues, friends, amidst the demanding schedules resulting from the current affairs in Turkey. I want to thank especially to the Theatre and Drama Network for their invitation, and especially for their exemplary work that they're undertaking in the field of drama and theater studies in Turkey. I am honored to deliver the keynote address on World Theatre Day, as Enes Hoca said, an annual celebration held on the 27th of March since 1962, commemorating the intrinsic and universal value of art. Annually, a prominent theatrical personality delivers a message. Last year, the message, "Art is Peace," authored by Norwegian playwright John Foss, was designated for presentation this year. The essence of Foss's message underscores the intrinsic antagonism between art and warfare and the inherent affinity between art and peace, thereby elucidating the capacity of art, particularly theater, to surpass delimitations and unify disparate individuals and cultures. Again, thank you for joining us today. And as Enes Hoca aptly put, we as English literature people are very keen on turning to Shakespeare when we're thinking about drama and theater. And his plays continue to be performed, studied, and analyzed, inspiring countless adaptations, interpretations, and artistic expressions today. One of my favorite academics on Shakespeare and author Jonathan Bate, in an article in The Telegraph, asks, but what is the source of the universal appeal of this balding middle-class gentleman born in a little Warwickshire market town in the reign of the first Queen Elizabeth? Why would the world's newest country, South Sudan, choose to put on a production of Cymbeline, or Sunnis and Shias opt to relocate the story of Romeo and Juliet in Baghdad? What is it about Richard III that appeals to Brazilians, or Othello to the Greeks? He missed Turks here, of course. Shakespeare, he continues, recognized that human affairs always embody a combination of permanent truths and historical contingencies, in Shakespeare's own terms, nature and custom. He grasped the structural conflicts shared by all societies, religious against secular, country against city, birth against education, strong leadership against the people's voice, the code of masculine honor against the energies of erotic desire. Yet, he says, Shakespeare also addressed the conflicts of his own historical moment, the transition from Catholicism to Protestantism and feudalism to modernity, the origins of global consciousness, the conflict between new ideas and old superstitions, the formation of national identity, the growth of trade and immigration, the encounter with a brave new world. And to us, to people living in this geography, since the 19th century, Shakespeare has been present in our enlightenment, being a catalyst in our fight, for our fight to be a part of modern civilization. Yes, I want to talk about genre today. I want to talk about the problem plays of Shakespeare, a subject that I have been dealing with, and it is an ongoing scholarly engagement for me. Now, when we call tragedy, it is of course impossible to remember Aristotle. Since Aristotle's definition of tragedy as an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude in language established with each kind of artistic ornament, the several kinds being found in separate parts of the play in the form of action, not of narrative, through pity and fear, affecting the proper purgation of these emotions, tragedy has been a hot debate in literary theory and criticism. The ultimate aim or purpose of tragedy, its telos, is to evoke pity and fear in the audience, leading to a catharsis, providing emotional release and cleansing. This is achieved by allowing the audience to experience and process their emotions in a safe and vicarious way. Aristotle emphasized the importance of plot, character, and emotional impact. Some interpretations extend the purpose of tragedy to provide moral and ethical reflection and insight into human suffering and consequences. Aristotle highly valued the plot as the most crucial element in eliciting pity and fear, leading to the necessary catharsis. In essence, the telos of tragedy is to provide a profound emotional and intellectual experience leading to emotional release and a deeper understanding of human existence. The ethos of tragedy, on the other hand, encompasses the moral character of its figures, the ethical framework it explores, and the cultural values it reflects. Key aspects include moral complexity, human limitations, and seriousness. Now, what happened to Aristotle? In the 16th century, we do not see a direct reference between Aristotle and early modern England. The dissemination of Aristotle works to England occurred through the intermediary translations and philosophical interpretations of Arab scholars rather than a direct transmission. Ben Jonson, a dear friend of Shakespeare and a fellow poet and playwright, who said that Shakespeare was the soul of the age and still not of an age, but for all time, also stated that Shakespeare knew, quote, small Latin and less Greek, unlike himself, who was a self-taught man in classical literature. On the screen is a title page of his complete works, which summarizes the Renaissance understanding of dramatic genres. Jonson, the uncompromising neoclassicist, identified himself with Horace and was the translator of his Ars Poetica. For his title page, he adapted 2 lines from Horace's satires, whose translation is, I do not strive to win the approval of the crowd, but am content with a few readers. But although it was uncommon for a poet to publish his works himself, he did so because he very much liked the pleasure of the crowd. And this illustration gives us, in a way, the history of the dramatic genres as well. At the lower part, on both sides of the printer's inscription, there are 2 vignette images titled Plaustrum and Visorium. Plaustrum meaning wagon, that is an allusion to Horace's assertion that the first speaking actor, Thespis, performed on carts, representing the origins of tragedy. On the other side, Visorium, coined by Jonson himself to mean the ancient chorus, whose vignette presents a theater alluding to ancient Greek theater with its circular structure, with the altar of Dionysus in the middle, surrounded by 8 dancers around the sacrificial fire, representing the satyr plays out of which comedy is thought to be originated. Now, these are the pillars on which other genres are based on. And here, this is the middle part, on the screen, on the left side, on top of Plaustrum, there is a tablier with the inscription Tragedia. On the opposite side is the figure titled Commedia. If we are to compare these 2 figures, we can see that no matter how Jonson is famous, especially for his comedies, his city comedies, there is a favoritism of tragedy. We have the tragedy on the left with the better off clothes and buskins and a crown and a sword with a mask with a helmet. Comedy, poor comedy on the right, wears a sandal, doesn't wear a crown, has a simple curtain behind her, together with a mask with a simple bonnet. Moreover, she seems to look at tragedy adoringly. A hierarchy that stems from classical times is set here as well. The columns support a horizontal beam with another inscription from Horace, this time from Ars Poetica, with Jonson's translation reads, each subject should retain the place allotted to it with decent praise, referring to the classical doctrine of decorum. And this is the top part. Above the beam, there is the medallion of a semicircle theater, more Roman than Greek. Therefore, this is more recent. On both sides, sides there is satyr and pastor. Satyr, half human, half goat, representing satire, and pastor, a shepherd playing his panpipe, representing the pastoral. In the middle, between Dionysus and Apollo, stands tragicomedia. Not altogether a classical genre, tragicomedy still is on the top and looking at us directly. So, is Johnson publishing his collected works on the year Shakespeare died, telling us what is to be left to us to the future from his era is more ambiguity on genres. Now, the enduring fascination with Shakespeare's work, of course, has led to extensive exploration of their genre categorizations. This scholarly pursuit has persisted for over 2 centuries, as evidenced by the multitude of publications and debates surrounding the classification of Shakespeare's plays. And no matter how, Shakespeare's ability to transcend and defy conventional genre boundaries has made this a particularly captivating area of study. It still continues. For instance, the tragicomedies, problem plays, and even some of the histories and romances have sparked lively discussions regarding their appropriate categorizations. Now, genre, we're talking about genre, which refers to kind, form, class of literature, having the same root with gender. You might perhaps find these discussions unnecessary, perhaps a little bit chauvinistic in trying to understand and analyze literature through kinds. But since Aristotle, discussing literature also brought about a discussion on the species of literature, especially of drama. Since Aristotle's time, literary genres have evolved, as they often do in time. Genres proved to be culture-specific, despite the neoclassical approach that sees genres as a natural phenomenon which the poets of antiquity discovered and must not be tampered with. But even Dr. Johnson, Samuel Johnson, tackled the evasive nature of genres, stating that the genres existed only to be subverted by a new genius. If that genius is Shakespeare, each play evolves into something new, making any form of classification absurd. But here I am. And perhaps it is the reason why, while Shakespeare's colleagues and friends, John Hemming and Henry Condell, 7 years after the bard's death, trying to bring together his work, had trouble in classification. In the first folio, as you will see, this is on the right, bottom right, there are 11 plays in the tragedies section, only missing one here, Troilus and Cressida, which was inserted to the folio somewhere between histories and tragedies without proper pagination. The list includes early tragedies like Titus Andronicus and Romeo and Juliet, Roman plays like Julius Caesar and Coriolanus, high tragedies like Macbeth and King Lear, and actually the last play under tragedy Cymbeline is not a tragedy at all. Kenneth Muir, in his oft-quoted comment, states that there is no such thing as Shakespearean tragedy. There are only Shakespearean tragedies. While it is an accepted notion that this is a complex situation, I will still attempt to group 4 plays under the category of problem tragedies. Okay, but first let's talk about in really general terms what we expect from a Shakespearean tragedy. First of all, tragic hero, the protagonist of the tragedy, typically, but not necessarily, a person of high standing or a person that is important for that society, but a person who has greatness. Of course, I'm quoting Bradley here. Twisting Shakespeare's words, Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and others have greatness thrust upon them. Well, tragic hero needs to have any of these kinds of greatnesses in him. The tragic protagonist possesses a hamartia, translated as tragic flaw, but I read this as an error of judgment. The flaw itself is not important. That stems from the particular character of the hero and which contributes to their downfall. The tragic hero experiences a significant reversal of fortune, often from a position of great power or happiness to one of suffering and death. Their downfall often involves a recognition of their flaw, which in Aristotle's terms is anagnoresis, but occurs too late to prevent disaster, and their demise often affect their states, societies, and the whole of humanity on a larger scale. Shakespeare's tragedies are driven by intense conflict, both internal and external, and the audience, again, as a homage to Aristotle, experiences a purging of emotions, a catharsis of pity and fear as they witness the hero's suffering. Supernatural elements such as ghosts, witches, or prophecies often play a role and influence the hero's actions or foreshadow tragic events. Shakespearean tragedies often explore the tension between fate and free will. Characters may believe they are controlled by fate, but their own choices ultimately contribute to their destiny. And there is always death in Shakespeare's tragedies. The pathetic also perishes with the tragic. This is known as the tragic waste. And these plays often display the struggle between good and evil, and in some plays, this is more problematized than the others. Well, why didn't Shakespeare write pure tragedies? Well, he was well aware of the genre differences, but he chose to ignore them and even made fun of such categorizations in Hamlet, as if he's laughing at me right now, as he makes Lord Polonius famously stating that the actors visiting Elsinore are the best actors in the world, either for tragedy, comedy, history, pastoral, comical, historical, pastoral, tragical, historical, tragical, comical, historical, pastoral, etc., etc. And there is, of course, another term that we know very well, and it is Shakespeare's problem plays or problem comedies that traditionally comprise three plays: All's Well That Ends Well, Measure for Measure, and Troilus and Cressida. And these are not going to go that deep into the stories within, but these all have certain problems that do not really fit in the expectations from a proper comedy. And the term problem tragedies is what I found out in order to figure out what these four tragedies have in common. These plays, Julius Caesar, Hamlet, Troilus and Cressida, and Timon of Athens, while distinct in their narratives and characterizations, share a preoccupation with moral ambiguity, societal dysfunction, and the problematic nature of human action and its consequences. They deviate from the conventional tragic structure, although themselves being tragedies, resisting straightforward resolutions. The protagonists in these plays often find themselves entangled in complex situations where traditional moral codes are inadequate, and their attempts to navigate these dilemmas lead to further complications and suffering. So again, I argue that these 4 plays are tragedies, but with problems. The problems that they contain do not exclude them, the position of a tragedy, but help classify them under a different category. They harbor many elements that make a Shakespearean tragedy. For instance, as I talk about the greatness of the tragic protagonist, the indestructible will and one-sidedness of the tragic protagonist is found in all these in different degrees and various forms. Although tragedies are based on an individual in which the individual confronts other individuals, family, society, etc., even the whole universe, there is usually a seeming social reconciliation at the end of tragedies, and even if it is not convincing after the death of the tragic character, even because of their death, the idea of a better future is formed in which mistakes in society, the sins in a society are cleansed. However, in these plays, which I call Shakespeare's problem tragedies, we are not left with hope for the future. These plays end either with an ambiguous and unresolvable ending, or with an ending that gives the feeling that the new order will be worse than the old one, or at least not better than the old one, or that the existing problems will continue rising with the same intensity or with complete pessimism and with complete pessimism and cynicism. So the ethos and telos of tragedy somehow are avoided. And I also argue that these plays could have, 2 of them should have ended in Act 3. So we have 2 additional acts to these plays. So, what was happening? Why did Shakespeare practice with the genre of tragedy? Now, this one of the reasons would be related to the times that he was living in early modern England, which was undergoing a radical historical change. There was also a reaction to this change. The tragedies under consideration reflect these reactions or the resistance to social change more comprehensively than the other tragedies. The rapid transformation of Elizabethan society from a feudal system to a capitalist one was a defining feature of early modern England. That's why we call it early modern. Despite the decline of the feudal system after the War of the Roses, a new market economy emerged, emphasizing profit and property rights. William Shakespeare was not only a playwright, but also a shrewd businessman. His father's financial status fluctuated during Shakespeare's early years, but Shakespeare himself achieved lasting financial success as a shareholder in the Chamberlain's Men, and by physically participating in the relocation of the theater to build the Globe and being a shareholder there. Shakespeare's understanding of the system went beyond finances. Despite the political themes in many of his plays, he was never imprisoned, tried, or executed, a rarity, or died of hunger, I don't know, which is a rarity for playwrights and poets of the era. He spent his final years comfortably in the new place, demonstrating his ability to navigate the complexities of his time. During the final years of Queen Elizabeth's reign, the Essex Rebellion occurred amidst a changing economic landscape, and Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex, blamed for his inability to quell the Irish rebellion on those opposed to him within the Queen's court, became the center of the court. Consequently, he and his faction, which included Shakespeare's former patron, the Earl of Southampton, plotted a rebellion. The plot was unsuccessful, resulting in treason trials for both Essex and Southampton, ending with Essex prosecution. And actually, Shakespeare's company was a part of this, as they were asked to stage Richard II, an early play in the day before the rebellion. And Shakespeare was aware of what was going on. He was living in that society, and it is likely that he was writing Troilus and Cressida during this turbulent period. And most of Shakespeare's tragedies are, in one way or another, and to varying degrees, concerned with this political and social problems and situations. But these plays that I'm talking about reflect not only these problems, but especially the confusion arising from social change, and are concerned with the reaction of individuals to this change, the contradictions and floundering of individuals who want to preserve the old in the face of the changing world, or who try to behave with these established codes, result in destruction. This resistance is not simply a result of incompetence to face change. The one-sidedness of the tragic protagonist, which is one of the musts that resist the devaluation of the ideals carried out by the change, prepares them for their catastrophe. So these plays focus on these individuals who cannot, by means of their idealism, or do not want to, by means of their consciousness, adapt to this rapidly changing world. Their endeavors to keep up with the new also result in an irrelevance and philosophical confusion. This uncertainty and confusion create not only thematic, but also structural problems in the problem tragedies, and therefore challenge the traditional form. And well, in these plays, which depict the conflict between the social and the personal in accordance with tragedy, there are protagonists who falter, who err in the face of social and political change. And when they try to assert their own will, their indestructible will, their end will be disaster. However, the sense of loss that we feel in other tragedies are not found here. The determined individual will is the core of tragedy, but in these plays, action is not based on the individual, but how the individual is, that will, that great will, is left irrelevant. And of course, we find this in many, many other plays, but the contrast between reality and appearance is more pronounced than it is in Shakespeare's other works. The audience is presented with a stark juxtaposition between what is true and what merely seems to be true. And this conflict between reality and appearance is a key factor in intensifying the tragic elements of the play. The stark duality between what is and what is perceived to be, what will be continuing, can be seen as a contributing factor to the play's tragic nature. The heightened contrast between reality and appearance contributes to the sense of tragedy by highlighting the characters' misperceptions and the gap between their understanding of the world and the true state of affairs. This disparity often leads to tragic consequences, as characters make decisions based on false assumptions or appearances that do not align with reality. These plays, therefore, therefore deviate from classic tragic formula where the conflict stems from the protagonist's error of judgment or hamartia. Instead, the conflict emerges from the protagonist's struggle to uphold those high ethical principles and ideals within a corrupt society. And of course, they are responsible for, should be responsible for their actions, but to what end? While a singular, universally applicable structural form cannot be found, but here we see a divergence from the traditional tragic structure to a higher degree. For instance, in Julius Caesar, the eponymous character meets his demise very prematurely. Actually, this play, Julius Caesar, is not about Julius Caesar, no matter how it is called so. It is, I've just read it somewhere, I guess, it is like calling Macbeth Duncan, because this is about Brutus, not the life and death of Julius Caesar. Again, in Timon of Athens, the protagonist's behavior fluctuates between extremes across the play's two sections. In Troilus and Cressida, a conventional tragic arc is not found, and in Hamlet, ambiguity permeates the narrative. And we can, as I said before, these plays could easily be ended in Act 3. Therefore, we can say that they could easily be divided into two. And we see this as a result of the inability of the tragic protagonists' inability to understand that times have changed, that what they are doing, their greatness, is not applicable, perhaps, here in this new world. Okay, and therefore, there is this, the dichotomy between good and evil, therefore, is blurred, creating a morally ambiguous landscape, leaving the characters grapple with complex and conflicting motivations, and therefore there is something good, there is something ideal, there is a world where ethical values are important, but it is no longer in the world of these tragedies. The idealism that often underpins tragedy, and Shakespeare's some of other works, is notably absent or even actively scorned in these plays. Characters who cling to the ideals are often portrayed as naive or foolish, while those who are willing to compromise their values are shown to be more successful in navigating the treacherous and social political landscape. The subversion of traditional morality and idealism creates a sense of unease and uncertainty in the character. Sorry, how much time do I have? Enes Hocam?
Sorry, Hocam. We have around 15 minutes or 20 minutes. It's up to you, really.
That's great. Okay, now I will pass this and try just give you small little notes on the plays, and we can discuss them in the discussion. So another aspect is the fact that the concept of the tragic hero in these plays is questionable. While the tragic hero, traditional tragic hero, is typically characterized by noble intention with a fatal flaw, blah, 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 some of the protagonists in these plays deviate from this because it is more the society that prepare their catastrophe. And therefore, in this kind of landscape, what we should be feeling, that catharsis is lost to some aspect, to some degree, sorry. And therefore, the future that we are left with at the end of these tragedies are really bleak. We do not have that scapegoating mechanism in these plays. It's as if we are left with a feeling of loss, meaningless loss, more than the proper purgation of pity. Now, if you look at Julius Caesar, no, this is a Roman tragedy. This is a Roman tragedy, a very good one. I'm sure you know the story, but in the third act, if this is life and death of Julius Caesar, the title character dies. So it should end there, but we are added another two acts because our focus is Brutus, a character who is after the already lost ideals belonging to the old republic. And he acts on those ideals, he acts on those ethical concerns only to make us see that Rome is no longer and hasn't been a republic for a very long time, that the ideals of the empire are already there. So therefore, his greatness in action turns into some kind of irregularity, starting a civil war and ending with the defeat of the Republicans. And therefore, we ask the question, so what was it all for? We are left with an uneasiness regarding Brutus's demise in the end. And Hamlet, of course, is very problematic. But again, this has of many people. I mean, I don't know the kind of. I don't think you can start even if you start reading criticism about Hamlet in the morning and end by midnight and read for I don't know 60 years, it won't be still enough. But I mean, very easily I can say that this is a revenge tragedy, and this could have ended as Hamlet killed Polonius in the third act. So I do not really believe that the leading force in this play is Hamlet's indecisiveness, because Hamlet can and does act, and he kills Polonius thinking that it is Claudius. Here, what problematizes the plot of revenge tragedy is that feudal sons believe in their father's ghosts when they ask for revenge. Hamlet needs to, prove that what the ghost said was true, and he does this through another appearance, through another illusion, through the working of a play in front of Claudius. And as the play ends, just before the rest is silence, Hamlet leaves the throne of Denmark to a Norwegian. Now, he is the enemy. He is the person that his father, he is the son of the person that his father, old Hamlet, fought with. So therefore, we see all these elements that take us away from this feeling of national identity in this play. And I think the most complex one is tragedy of Troilus and Cressida. It starts as a romantic tragedy like Romeo and Juliet and Antony and Cleopatra, and ends like a Roman tragedy where the only figure left with any kind of tragic greatness is killed ingloriously. I'm talking about Hector. In this play, the only person that is worth the tragic greatness is Hector, but we are told that it is the tragedy of Troilus and Cressida. No matter how, none of them die, and I do not believe that their demise is tragic. But Troilus and Cressida explores the futility of war and love and the absurdity of high ideals like loyalty and heroism in such a society. The two main plots of the play are the love story between our lovers, Troilus and Cressida, and the ongoing war between the Greeks and the Trojans. Like Shakespeare's other plays with loving couples in the title, the social takes over the private, both love and war by means of exchange, trade, and substitution, and with frustration, deceit, and tragedy. Throughout the play, one thing is always substituted for another. And just remember Romeo and Juliet, that there is one truth for Romeo, that is Juliet. There is one truth, one reality for Juliet, that is Romeo. It is not so here, because the society, the background is not, we will not allow such a greatness. And we usually, there is the substitution of one thing with its opposite, undermining the meaning of the former, like war with love, love with war, action with inaction, high ideals with cynicism, rhetoric with defamation, and the main discussions on heroic or chivalric ideals are immediately followed by cynical or frivolous comments, either by Thersites or Pandarus, that make them the critical voices in this play. So no matter how this is an epic story in Troilus and Cressida, the epic ideal is no longer valid in this proto-capitalist society. Shakespeare seems to identify the English with the Greeks, and the now lost ideals of chivalry find their representation in Trojan Hector. Therefore, the Trojan War fought for honor and valor in the epic story, in Homer's story, is now degraded into the story of a whore and a cuckold. So sex is presented with the language of conquest, and women as spoils of war with market value. Determining action is the exchange of Cressida for Antenor, an exchange of Helen for Hesione. In the Petrarchan love story between Troilus and Cressida, Troilus is left irrelevant, Cressida is false, Pandarus is the panda, the procurer who closes the deer. And as I said before, Hector, who stands anachronistic in this society, who lives up to the chivalric ideals, is denied even an honorable death and is murdered senselessly by Achilles, further making chivalric ideals or heroic ideals void, lapsed, and even absurd. Okay. Also, this is a very difficult play in terms of any analysis in terms of tragic form. I want to suggest that this is a satire. This is a satirical allegory that tried to be squeezed into tragic form. So again, this is a play that has an ambiguous moral message, an unconventional structure. The first part of the play is completely different from the second part of the play. and it's an inversion of the first part even, and we do not have a clear vision of any kind of human nature or social values, and we see that the will of the tragic hero is completely undermined, and we see Timon, our protagonist, experiencing a drastic transformation from a philanderer to a misanthropic recluse, and the transformation fueled by his disillusionment and the loss of ideals, as he witnesses the ingratitude and betrayal of those that he once helped, and the only thing that he wants is the complete destruction of humanity, complete destruction of his city of Athens. And therefore, this is a play that includes, behind its Greek background, all those proto-capitalistic ideals squeezed into it. I think, although I skipped a lot, this is the end of my talk.
Thank you very much for this brilliant talk, and I reckon we are all fascinated by the information and the speech you make on Shakespeare and Shakespeare's problem tragedies. The discussion was always about how we can categorize Shakespeare and if we can really put categories on the Shakespeare's plays, because they are very complex in structure, and as you said, there are generally more than we need really in a tragedy in Shakespeare. So it makes them a kind of space for us to discuss more, go deeper into the basic structure and how Shakespeare becomes a writer who wrote masterpieces of theater. Okay, now I think we need to have some time for our audience and participants to share their ideas and questions, so we can enrich this lecture a little bit further. Any questions you want to ask, or if you want to make comments on either on Evrim Hoca's speech or Shakespeare or categorization of Shakespeare's plays as problem plays, will be welcome.
Can I ask something, Enes Hocam?
Okay, thank you very much, Ela Hocam.
Thank you, Evrim Hocam. It is really nice to see you and have the chance to hear you and the explanations you made. The problem plays, they are really problematic, as you mentioned. And as you have explained, considering comedies and tragedies, we have some exceptions. What about romances of Shakespeare? And as far as I remember, there are some tragicomedies as well. So I was wondering how you have found the problematic aspects of those genres. Thank you for everything, for the detailed explanation.
Ella, hi, this is an excellent question. I think you understood where I was going when I said that these plays could end in the third act. Yes. So I don't like to bring, biographical readings into Shakespeare and in relation to the categorization of his plays, but then it works because from here, I mean, you have those time-restricted tragedies that more allude to, proper tragedies, if I may say, in his earlier years, and then, by the turn of the century, we see that the problematization begins not only in tragedies, but in his comedies, while at the same time, he was also writing his great tragedies, the four great tragedies, including Hamlet. And we see that in the, his final years, let's say, we have what we now call romances, or Shakespeare's late romances or late plays that strive to turn something tragic into comedy. Now, we have happy endings in romances, in the, but then these are not comedies as well. It's as if Shakespeare is finding a difficult time trying to write a comedy in this world, or trying to write a proper tragedy in this world. And therefore, what he does is give people time, give action time, give the narrative, dramatic narrative time, so that time may heal all those problems, and that a new generation perhaps can start anew. We're not very sure if they will be successful in eliminating all those difficult social problems that the plays have, or even individual problems that the plays have. But then, we skip to this, vastness of time in his later plays. So if it answers your question, I think that we're hearing those late romances in the construction of the plays that I am dealing with.
Thank you,
Thank you for the question.
Most probably, when you talk about time, it might be related to the triviality of life, maybe, when we think about the last play. As far as I remember, Tempest was the last one, right?
Yes.
And it was also one of the problem plays of Shakespeare.
It is, yes, discussed as one of the problem plays, but I would say that it has more affinities with Edward Dowden's categorization of, romances than with other problem plays.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else to ask a question or any comments? We are quite crowded, by the way. We have 8 to 6 people now around.
Oh, I'm so flattered. Thank you very much.
It was full, actually. It was 100 people, and we couldn't accept many people to this, speech. So we will record this, and we will air this later on YouTube, so our students also can watch this, because we want our students to watch this. It's a chance for them, maybe once in their lifetime, to hear about Shakespeare from an expert in Shakespeare, because we are teaching Shakespeare, but we are never. We have never been experts. We are just enjoying reading Shakespeare, trying to understand, the Shakespeare's complex structures and characterization and philosophical, points his, contribution to the theater, and so it's very enjoyable for us. So that was, our privilege, really, to have you today.
Honored. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And any comments? We have some time, around 10-20 minutes before we start our lessons, by the way, because 1:30 we will start our lessons again. Any questions and comments? Okay. There are, comments on the chat section that I'll read a couple of them for you. Aya Baysas said, this session was so inspiring and informative, since I am working on my master's thesis in the context of leadership in characters. Thank you for this precious talk. Hope to meet again. And people are thanking. And that's the day. We are here to celebrate the World Theatre Day. Really, without Shakespeare, I think we couldn't really talk about the World Theatre Day, because Shakespeare is like, a kind of international writer, playwright that everyone knows, and nobody really completely understands.
I don't think anyone ever did, to tell you the that's why I think he is in the center of focus in many different cultures across the centuries still. And I'm not sure if you have noticed, but lately, one of the topics that I gave Theatre and Drama Network was the late productions of Shakespeare in Istanbul, but thinking that many people wouldn't or doesn't have a chance to see them, we decided on a larger topic like Shakespeare, that that would be a better umbrella for many people that is in dramatic business. But in terms of this change, in terms of this social complexities, in times that people's freedoms are in question, it seems that the number of Shakespeare productions also rise in Turkey. So perhaps this tells us why we find it, we turn to Shakespeare when, we are trying to understand ourselves, our world, our societies, and why things happen the way they do.
Thank you very much. Your comments are spot on, with the politics and things in our country also. Okay, Mr. Hocam wants to ask a question, I think.
Yeah, Evrim Hocam, thank you so much for this brilliant presentation. I would like to ask, or just wonder, when we think about Henrik Ibsen's protagonist, just because Henrik Ibsen, protagonist, yes, just because, as we know well, that he labels his plays as problem plays in the 19th century. When we think about the protagonist, what are the similarities or differences between Shakespeare? Because when we think about Shakespeare tries in his some plays deconstruct the traditional form, and Henrik Ibsen has accepted the father of modern drama and a new realism, and so we observe new protagonists and label them as problem plays. So just wonder, Hocam, what are the differences or similarities between problem plays, Ibsen and Shakespeare?
Excellent question. Another excellent question. Thank you, Mesut. This is a very complicated one, because probably what I said about Troilus and Cressida made you wonder about the tragic form. And I don't know, I'm, for instance, thinking about what was the name of the play? The Father, the one about sexual disease. Which play was that? I can't remember that it had one.
Which Ibsen's play? Or?
Ibsen, yes.
No, Ghost or Nora?
Okay, thank you. In Nora too. I mean, I think this is what Ibsen takes from Shakespeare or is inspired by Shakespeare, and who tries to put that tragic form in his own society, in his own time, and again, perhaps doing a better job in following the tragic arc. But again, if we talk about the will of the characters, when we're talking about that greatness, in many ways, that greatness of the protagonists of Ibsen is lost in that society that only would be good for their destruction. But then, the society really perhaps does not care about that greatness any longer, that it is not the times for that kind of will, that or, ethical greatness or, moral standard, if I may say.
Like Enemy of the People, Hocam, Dr. Stockman, has indicated.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Thank you, Hocam. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Again, very good question, Mesut.
Okay, Kanan wants to ask a question.
Hi.
Hello, thank you very much for this beautiful presentation, Professor Evrim. Samet Hoca suggested. He was your student, I assume, Dr. Samet
Yes,
from Karabük University.
yes.
I am now his
Is he
student.
here?
I'm not sure. He just suggested and I joined and I learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
actually have two questions, if that's okay. The first question is that, well, I don't unfortunately know much about Shakespeare. I know, but I think it's not really enough. And I would like to learn more. So that's why which play of his should I read or watch at first so that I can learn more about him as an introduction, I will say. To go, of course, I know a lot, but I think that's really not enough. And I need to learn step by step and go in an order. And the second question would be, because most of my studies are about contemporary literature of our time, most of them are female writers, female playwrights that I work with. And I would like to ask you if you know any contemporary female playwrights that are so similar to Shakespeare, and so we can understand and compare him better to our time. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this made me think actually. Now, where would I start? I teach Shakespeare. I'm not sure if this is a good idea, but I always start with Romeo and Juliet and A Midsummer Night's Dream. Because especially in terms of genre, I believe that these two plays are the same. But one becomes a tragedy and the other one becomes a comedy. The kind of tragic potential that they have are the same, is the same, but Shakespeare somehow played tricks to turn one play into a comedy, while the other, very famously is a tragedy, but they both have the source. Of course, not direct source, but he uses this also in his comedy, The Tragedy of Pyramus and Thisbe. If there is social unrest, there is very little chance for private happiness of the lovers. So perhaps these two would be very good. And because they're, companion plays, they're like their sister plays in a way, and mostly studied together. So perhaps that would be a very good idea. And if you're studying contemporary literature, I think it was, 5 years ago, the Hogarth Press paid certain authors to rewrite Shakespeare's plays, and I think most of them, came out very good. And so that would be a good chance to see the rewritings of Shakespeare's plays. But I do not think that, especially in the British tradition, anyone would be devoid of any influence of Shakespeare in British and in Anglo-Saxon world in general, I would say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the
I will do
question.
as you say. I have taken my notes. Thank you.
Thank
That was
you.
great.
Neslihan Hocam was going to ask something, I think.
If we still have time. Hi, Evrim.
maybe.
Thank you for your great talk. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. I'm going to keep my question shortly without introduction. I know that you've worked extensively on The Winter's Tale, and this is a little bit, I listened to your talks on Winter's Tale. So I was wondering whether it is possible to include The Winter's Tale as a domestic tragedy, because there has been some, discussion on the play. So especially if we consider this time gap in the play and the violence the play harbors. And so what do you think? I mean, like, if you think vice versa, I mean, like a domestic tragedy being The Winter's Tale as a domestic tragedy.
Okay, I have a rule. I mean, you can't put rules, but I mean, I have to, have some rules. So my rule is to follow Lord Byron when he says that all tragedies are ended by a death, with a death, and all comedies ended with marriage. Now, this is the only rule that I can put in, different the two kinds of literature, two kinds of dramatic activity. Now, no matter how, there is death in The Winter's Tale, the death of Mammalus, this feigned death of Hermione. I cannot call this a domestic tragedy because it is not a tragedy. That there is some sort of, no matter how forced it is, reconciliation in the end. Of course, you can read it symbolically, that this is the end of a generation. And why did all this suffering take place? Only because a man, a king, a man in power thought that something was going on, right? Without any evidence whatsoever. There is the element of the tragic, but in terms of form, in terms of structure, I cannot call it domestic tragedy the way Othello is, if it makes sense to you, because there is a finality in the end. Whereas, as you said, and as we discussed this a moment ago with Ela too, Shakespeare gave these time to ask the old generation to get out of here, so that, because they're flawed, but gives a chance to the next generation with the help of that time. So yes, it deals with domestic issues, but I would have difficulty, because of that rule that I have, call it tragedy, because I'm following the tragic structure in my answer. What do you think?
Actually, I don't follow that rule, but it will be a little bit longer. I think we may discuss it. When time allows more. But I think there is this psychological violence in the play, and there is this domestic tragedy elements. like the 16 years of let's say silence. Although you follow the form, I would argue that I may include it in the form of domestic tragedy as well. But after your answer, I will work on it more and then I'll reach you out.
You have a very good point, Desan, really, but then can't we find that kind of violence in many comedies as well?
Yeah, we have. I know. We have, but maybe that I work on this play a lot, and so the tragic element in The Winter's Tale, like a 16 years of silence and the death of the children and the let's say the violence Leontes has throughout the play, I think makes it a little bit domestic tragedy for me. And not for me, of course, for some studies also to say that. But I will work on more and then I'll reach you out, as you say.
Yeah, I really, I think about form a lot. So
Yeah.
I call this, what happens in the play tragic, but I wouldn't necessarily call it tragic. Otherwise, many, we look at the comedies list, like half of it would have to go to the tragedy side. But I think Doden made a very good discovery in calling these plays romances, late romance.
Maybe we could talk about the possibilities of reading it. There is no such reading, but we may talk about the possibilities of reading it, if there's a possibility.
It all depends on how you read Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Whether you love I think that would be brilliant in terms of drama studies. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been a very long session for Evrim Hocam. I can imagine that it has been very exhausting for her. So we are coming to the end of the session. We have one more question, one last question by Özlem Hocam in the chat section. She asked, is there a reason why you didn't include Merchant of Venice among the problem plays? To Evrim Hocam.
Yeah, again, another question about how this is again about how I look at genres. Same with Neslihan Hoca's question. That I sincerely believe that Shakespeare was trying to write a comedy while he was writing The Merchant of Venice, and his focus was not actually on Shylock, but on the lovers. And we see this in his again, dividing the setting into two, the green place and the court, the city, etc., the female place and the male place. So therefore, as a result of structure, I'm not calling that I'm not saying that play is not tragic. It is, but because I do not structurally see that play as a tragedy, I did not include it in these 4 plays, because these 4 plays, after all, are tragedies. That is tragic, together with many, many pathetic characters die. So, there is no future for them. There is no next generation. There is no comedy. There is no wedding in the end.
Thank
There's
you.
that next year as well.
Okay, thank you
Evrim
very much.
Hocam, hi. Thank you so much. It's not the best time for me to join virtually, but I wanted to add something. My question was about the introduction part of your speech. In the beginning, you talked about the problem plays. And you said these plays are measure for measure, all's well that ends well, and Troilus and Cressida. My question was about that part, actually. I'm not asking why you did not include The Merchant of Venice among problem tragedies, but problem plays in general, just to make it clear.
All right, excellent. Yes, but it's not only that play. Some of my actually, all the 4 plays that I'm dealing with also was considered one way or another under problem plays or problem comedies. But what I'm trying to do is not talk about problem comedies.
I see.
I'm saying that these 4 plays are tragedies. So they're not comedies, or they cannot be discarded as tragedies because of certain problems, but they when they come together, they form a group that is different from other plays that Shakespeare wrote, if that makes sense.
I see, Hocam. Thank you so much.
Sure.
It was great listening to you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. As I reckon, all of you wants this to continue until eternity, but unfortunately it won't be, because we need to stop. And thank you very much for your participation. And we appreciate Shakespeare, and we appreciate Evrim Hoca for her comments, her presentation, and everything today. It was a great pleasure for us to have you, to all of the audiences. I hope we can have another speech like this, because it was quite popular, by the way. So thank you again, and we can have maybe a screenshot or something as a part of tradition of TDN. Then we will finish this session.
Let me just wait.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you,
And
hocam.
we will see you again.
Thank you again.
Bye
I'm
bye.
grateful, really. The honored.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much again, hocam. Thank you all.
Great Bayram.
Thank you very much, Evrim hocam.
Thank you, Pelin.
Thank you, hocam. It was a great talk.
Oh, Tuba, hi. Thank
Hocam.
you very much for being here.
Thank
Very
you.
good to
It's
see
a great pleasure listening to you. Thank you very much.
you.
Take care. Goodbye, everyone.
It was marvelous, hocam.
Oh, thank you. Oh, flattery will get you anywhere. Yes. Thank you, Hakan. Thank you, really.
It was a pleasure.
I hope it made sense.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Thank you. So now we are finishing the session.
Yeah.
Take
Yeah,
care.
I'm ending the recording, and thank you again. And
Thank you, arkadaşlar. You're great. Hakan, Pelin, Mesut, Enes, Pelin. I mean, you're doing a great job, really. And I am really very proud of you. All of you.
Thank you very much.
sağ olun hocam. Görüşmek üzere.
Bye.